Today on Personal Injury Court.
How does somebody get their hand chewed up at a law firm?
When I reached my hand in there, it swallowed my thumb, these fingers.
Who puts their hand in a shredder?
Don't.
All I could do in that situation was just scream.
You're suing for $520,000.
We cannot always fix fingers that have been so catastrophically injured.
He did this to my son.
Casey did this to himself. He's not qualified to operate the shredder?
This is bizarre because a personal injury happens in a law office.
Judge Gino Brogdon spent 10 years on the bench ruling on cases worth billions of dollars. Now he presides over some of the largest claims in TV history. This is Personal Injury Court.
Good day, everyone. This is the matter of Gordon versus Taylor. Ms. Gordon, it's my understanding from the documents that you filed with this court that you are suing Mr. Taylor for injuries that your son sustained when he was at Mr. Taylor's office. You're asking this court to award you $100,000 for past medical expenses, $30,000 for future medical expenses, $390,000 for pain and suffering, for a total award of $520,000. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Taylor, it's your position, based on documents you filed with this court, that if Mr. Gordon had followed simple instructions, he never would have been injured, so his injuries are his fault. True?
Correct, Your Honor.
Well, let's get into the legal sauce. Now, why would your son be at Mr. Taylor's office?
He was looking for a job, but he's getting ready for college, so he wants to do pre-law. And my friend is in a law office here, so I told him about it, and he offered and suggested that Casey come to his office to shadow him.
So, Casey, you're thinking about being a lawyer, huh?
Yes, Your Honor. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've always just really been into law, and I've always found that type of work very fascinating. But honestly, whenever I was there, I don't really think I honestly didn't really think I was that smart, maybe, to be an attorney, you know?
Well, I'm glad you met me today, because you need to know I didn't plan on going to college. And when I talked to a lawyer the first time in college, and he told me about what being a lawyer was, it sounded like football, but you just didn't get to tackle anybody. So that's how I ended up being a lawyer. So keep your sight on that, because if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, you are a lawyer.
Correct, Your Honor. So Donna mentioned that she would like to, she would be interested in Casey coming and actually shadowing me at work so he could understand the ins and outs and the operations in the office. He's not an employee, a paid employee, part-time or full-time, so we had him sign a standard NDA.
Okay. So this on the screen is what you had Casey sign, the NDA that you talked about?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
Number 4 says, visitor agrees the purpose of this visit is to observe Taylor, Gill, and Johnson to help determine whether or not he would like to attend law school. That was the purpose of the shadowing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Completely in an observer mode and going around to the different departments in the office.
Seeing how sausage is made.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Ms. Gordon, you signed this, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
So how did this happen?
The way I got hurt was this guy, he was out on a lunch break. And what he did the whole time that I was there, from what I saw, he just shredded paper. And I noticed he still had a pretty decent sized stack of paper there. So I said I didn't want to just be standing around, you know, just doing nothing, because I want to help out.
Okay, so you are trying to help out, then what happened?
Whenever it got jammed, I was kind of freaking out. I didn't want to get in trouble. So I reached in, I grabbed a piece of paper, and as I pulled that piece of paper out, the machine, it just kicked on. And I had no time to react, and it just sucked my hand, just sucked it right into those blades. I had no time to react to that. All I could do in that situation was just scream, because my hand was lodged and getting torn apart.
Shredders are meant to destroy. So when you put your hand in there, it just chewed your hand up.
It mauled it. When I looked down, there was blood everywhere.
You have no idea. To get that call is every parent's worst nightmare.
Yes, ma'am.
And
You're right, I don't have any idea. I've never gotten that call. It must have been really bad for you. Now, Mr. Taylor, how does somebody get their hand chewed up at a law firm?
Your Honor, my office door was closed as I'm working, trying to prepare for meetings, and then all of a sudden I hear all of the screams come out of the bullpen area.
You knew something bad had
was
happened.
going on. Something
Okay.
was going on. So I weaved my way in, and Casey's hand was stuck in the shredder, inside the shredder. People were trying to help and pull his hand out, but it was agonizing. I'm terribly sorry that it happened, but that's not my fault.
Well, I'll figure that out. Casey, as you were explaining this, I could see your face got pale. Now, I need to know exactly how this really freaky thing happened. Will you cross over to the monitor and show me exactly how your hand got in this shredder?
Yes, of course, Your Honor.
Take your time, son.
Thank you. Yeah, this is how the shredder actually looked like. This is more how it looked.
And you're pushing papers down in there.
Yeah, I was pushing papers down in there, and like it just jammed. I don't know, for whatever reason. But
Okay.
honestly, when I reached my hand in there, it swallowed my thumb, these fingers, and it just
Just ripped your fingers right off.
yeah, it mangled them.
That's bad. That is bad. Casey,
Like-
looking at the medical records that you submitted to this court, 3 of your fingers were chewed off.
The only fingers I have on my hand at this moment.
And that's a photo of your hand?
Yes, Your Honor.
I get
yeah.
nauseous looking at that picture.
Coming up,
Why didn't somebody watch him?
I am unable to babysit.
When it jammed, did it cross your mind, maybe I ought to call somebody?
There's no warning labels.
His shredder did this to my son.
This court has consulted an orthopedic hand surgeon.
The nerves are depicted by yellow strands that go out to the tips of the fingers. Those yellow strands, the arteries and veins were completely disrupted.
It's a shredder. It chews up paper. It'll do more damage to flesh.
It swallowed my thumb, these fingers, and it just
Ripped your fingers right off.
it mauled it.
That is bad.
I had a coworker call me and tell me that my son was hurt. And I immediately started crying, and I picked up the phone and called my husband, his father, and told him to meet me at the hospital as fast as he could. And until I got to that hospital, until I saw Casey's hand and him laying there just unconscious, I mean, this is my baby's hand, and it is destroyed.
Yes, ma'am. I say it and I will say it again. Anytime there is an injury to a child, it's an injury to a parent. It's the worst injury you can suffer.
This is my
as
world.
A parent.
This is my world. And
I see
they
the
told
pain
us,
on your face.
I mean, you sent him to a law office with a friend who was supposed to be watching him and teaching him so that he could better his life. And this is the outcome.
Mr. Taylor, why didn't somebody watch him? I know you're not watching a 5-year-old, but somebody ought to be watching him.
Your Honor, I am unable to babysit a
Kyle.
child. I am unable to babysit a child. He was
Thank
there to
God,
observe.
you're bad at it.
He's able to walk around the office. He is not supposed to be doing any actual work inside of that office. Everything that he does, who puts their hand in a shredder?
Don't,
Who puts
no.
their hand
Talk to
in
me.
Donna?
Talk
You're
Mr. Taylor.
unemployed. You're
in the shredder.
unemployed.
We're going to have order in this court, and y'all going to talk to me today.
Yes, Your
Okay? Not to each other.
Yes,
Now,
Yes, Your Honor.
this thing has teeth. You see what it does to
Yeah,
paper,
Your Honor.
right?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
Now, when
I
it
understand.
jammed, did it cross your mind, maybe I ought to call somebody?
He caused
Your
his own
Honor.
injury, Your Honor. He caused his own injury.
Your Honor.
But on your
Your Honor.
shredder in your law office, and
He was
think
not-
about this.
Yes, sir.
This is bizarre because a personal injury happens in a law office.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
That's the last place that's supposed to happen.
It's a terrible, terrible situation. Terrible situation, and everyone feels terrible about it. But it was his own fault. He caused his own injury.
Your Honor,
That's my child you're talking about.
Nothing was on the machine. I was never told not to go near it. Nothing. There's no warning labels.
Oh, you can't strain my common sense here, though.
Yeah. His
Because
own
we as
employee was
parents,
doing
don't we
it.
teach our children, don't touch that stove because it's hot.
Yes.
Exactly.
Next,
The physicians had to amputate at the level of the index, long, and ring fingers at the base of the finger.
I have to relearn how to write, how to draw.
The situation would not have ever happened if he would have done what he should have done, which is observe.
If his child was working in my office, I can guarantee you that this would have never happened.
That's all a hypothetical.
Folks, I think I've heard what I need to hear. I'm ready to render my decision.
Casey's hand was stuck in the shredder.
All I could do in that situation was just scream because my hand was lodged and getting torn apart.
But that's not my fault.
To better understand the nature of your injuries from a medical perspective, this court has consulted an orthopedic hand surgeon, Dr. Carrie Treeple. Will you get Dr. Treeple, Sheriff?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good day, doctor.
Good day, Your Honor.
Casey suffered a severe hand injury. Can you explain from a medical perspective the nature of this injury?
What initially happened, as he already described, is that his index, long, and ring fingers were drawn into the shredder and shredded. His thumb impacted the wall of the shredder and was almost avulsed.
How do you treat such an injury?
So, coming into the emergency department, if I see a finger like this long finger that's very dusky, then I know that there is a big problem. Now, if we move on to the second illustration, we remove that layer of skin. So what you see here is that the nerves are depicted by yellow strands that go out to the tips of the fingers. So in Casey's injury, at this level, the index, the long, and the ring fingers, those yellow strands, the arteries and veins were completely disrupted.
How do you repair a hand that's been injured in this way?
Unfortunately, we cannot always fix fingers that have been so catastrophically injured. So as you see, what in this depiction, what we had to do was amputate at the level at which the finger would survive. Now, in Casey's instance, the physicians had to amputate at the level of the index, long, and ring fingers at the base of the finger.
Thank you, doctor. We appreciate you. You're relieved. So, Casey, regardless of what happens in this case, your future is still very bright, and it ain't over yet, so don't count yourself out.
Yes, Your Honor, but I just need to stress to you that I have to restart how to completely just relearn how to write, how to draw, because this was my main hand.
As a 17-year-old, he's trying to be a man and be dependent on his own. And now he has to come back to his mom and help him get dressed again.
Yes, ma'am.
Fix his hair for him. He has to learn all of that all over again.
Mr. Taylor, this is a big one. You see that?
It's terrible, Your Honor.
Why is this not your fault? This is terrible.
It's a terrible situation, Your Honor. I understand completely, and I feel terrible about the whole situation. But the situation would not have ever happened if he would have done what he should have done, which is observe. He's not qualified to operate the shredder. He's not trained. He watched someone do it 2 times. If I watch someone drive a race car, that doesn't qualify me to drive a race car, all right?
Okay, do you have children?
Yes.
What would you say if this were your son?
I would be very, very, first off, my children would not do something like this. They would not stick their
These are perfect.
Every
in
parent
a shredder that's still turned on, Your Honor. It's still turned on.
Listen,
He should have turned it off.
The guy
First
should
of
have
all,
turned it off.
everybody's headache is mild until it's yours.
Absolutely, I understand.
So when this happens to someone else's child, it's easy for me and you because all three of my boys got their fingers. Be a very different picture if you're sitting over here where Mr. Gordon is.
Absolutely.
Now, Mr. Gordon, I haven't heard from you all day. Would you rise? Because I want to know what you're going through too.
Yes, Your Honor. I can't tell you the pain that I've gone through watching my son suffer with this injury. The anger, the emotion. And guess what, Your Honor? He did this to my son. His shredder did this to my son.
Casey did this to himself, Your Honor.
No.
If his child was working in my office, I can guarantee you that this would have never happened. Somebody would be responsible for that child during the whole time that he was in that office.
It's fantastic
This is
to pose
absolutely
the hypothetical.
ridiculous.
That's all a hypothetical.
Folks, I think I've heard what I need to hear. I'm ready to render my decision.
Thank you.
The verdict is in.
You see somebody using the shredder, you think it's a good idea to help. You try to put papers into the shredder. When your hand gets chewed up by this machine, you believe it's Mr. Taylor and his law firm's fault. Mr. Taylor, you've put up evidence today that we're not dealing with a 5-year-old, we're dealing with a teenager, and he was supposed to observe the way the NDA set that out.
There's blood everywhere.
The situation would not have ever happened if he would have done what he should have done, which is observe. He's not qualified to operate the shredder.
I'm ready to render my decision. In every personal injury case, the plaintiff has the burden of proving three things. Often I refer to it as a three-legged stool. The plaintiff has to prove that the defendant is wrong. That's the first leg. The second leg is that the defendant's wrong caused your injuries. Here you've put up evidence that you go to the law office, you're going to observe, you end up wandering into where the shredder is. No one told you to be there. No one told you you couldn't be there. You see somebody using the shredder, you think it's a good idea to help when that person leaves. You try to put papers into the shredder to make sure you lessen the workload. When your hand gets chewed up by this machine, you believe it's Mr. Taylor and his law firm's fault because he should have either kept you out of that room or had somebody watching you. I understand why you filed this lawsuit. Mr. Taylor, you've put up evidence today that we're not dealing with a 5-year-old, we're dealing with a teenager who should know better of what's obvious. And he was supposed to observe. And despite his intent, he should have just observed the way the NDA set that out rather than trying to help. His trying to help, according to you, exposed him to danger, and he's responsible for his own injuries. What this set of facts raises is a very unforgiving part of the law. Under the law, where there is an open and obvious danger, and a person exposes them to that, knowing the risk, regardless of the severity of the injury, if that person is injured in putting themselves in the danger zone, the law holds that person responsible. It's a shredder. It's got teeth. It chews up paper. It'll do more damage to flesh. I hate this result because you have a terrible injury, but the law requires me to apply open and obvious danger to you and say you assume the risk, the obvious risk of your hand being mangled. In that regard, you bear the burden. I am compelled to find in favor of the defendant despite your injuries. And so I find for the defendant and against the plaintiff. I wish you well, young man. This is my final verdict, and this matter is adjourned.
This is Personal Injury Court.
Good day, everyone. This is the matter of Hughes versus Evans. Mr. Hughes, it's my understanding you're suing on behalf of your daughter who sustained injuries when she was on the defendant Miss Evans' jungle gym. You're asking this court to award you $25,000 for your past medicals, $5,000 for your future medicals, $70,000 for your daughter's pain and suffering, for a total award of $100,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Miss Evans, you believe had he been watching his daughter, we never would be here today. This is his fault, true?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Well, let's get into the legal sauce. Now, in looking at the court documents, you sound like a super dad. Tell me about you and your daughter.
Well, I live at the complex, and of course with my wife and my 4-year-old daughter. We've loved the complex since we moved in there.
That's your baby?
Yes, Your Honor, that is.
She's beautiful. I should have had girls.
When we were looking for places to live, we wanted a place that was going to offer a jungle gym and a park nearby, and this complex offered both those. My daughter absolutely loves to play in the jungle gym. It's her most favorite thing in the world to do, and when we were looking for places to live, it was one of our top considerations. We needed a place that had a park close by and offered a jungle gym, so it was perfect for us. We really love the complex. As you can see, it's a fairly big-sized jungle gym. And there's a lot of kids there to play as well. So it's been a great place to live.
You sound like a pretty good dad.
I like to think I am.
So, Miss Evans, tell me about your complex and tell me about the jungle gym, too.
It's a small community, 4
Okay.
buildings, about 70 units. I live there myself now, and I treat...
So you actually live in the place that you work?
I'm a manager
and
who
own.
lives on property.
Okay.
Tenants can reach me anytime, and I treat them like my family. We have a great social life at this complex, and a lot of it has to do with this central park area in the center of the complex that has park benches and a small playground nearby, picnic tables, barbecue grills.
Sounds like this jungle gym was kind of a crown jewel for this place.
Well, when I bought the property, Your Honor, I completely renovated the whole thing.
Okay, so you spent some money renovating this place.
I did, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I spent probably about $50,000 total. Wow. So now, yeah, we have brand new jungle gyms. The tenants and kids love it.
And that's what it looks like.
Exactly right.
And it didn't look like that when you got it.
Oh, it did not. It was very run down. The whole complex was in decline.
So, Mr. Hughes, tell me about the day that your daughter was injured. How did it happen?
Well, Your Honor, it was a beautiful sunny day outside, and my daughter came running to me and was just begging to go out to the playground and play in the jungle gym. So, of course, I can't say no to her. So just outside, my daughter can see the jungle gym from our complex. So she just took off running, Your Honor. She saw her friends there, and I could see off in the side some of the parents sitting down. So I went and joined some of the parents, and we were having conversation, and I saw immediately my daughter just flew up to the top, and she was just playing, laughing, fun with the other kids. So she got about midway up, and she looks back at me, and she's like, "Daddy, Daddy!" She's just screaming her little head off, looking at me, and I was like, "Hey, pumpkin," and so I was continuing my conversation with one of the parents, and I looked back over, and she was laughing, and then suddenly she just fell. She slipped off and just hit the ground really hard, Your Honor.
Your heart must have dropped.
My heart jumped through my throat. It was terrifying. So I immediately jumped off the bench. I went flying over to her. I wanted to pick her up, and I looked down, and she was just screaming.
I know this had to be scary.
Yelling. Loudest screams I've ever heard her scream, and she was holding her head.
Could you tell then that her head was injured?
Yeah, I saw blood, Your Honor. And I also see her arm, it looked like it was broken. And I was just trying to not lose it, but I started to get a little hysterical. I was starting to cry, and so I got down to the ground, and I wanted to hold her. I wanted to grab her and just squeeze her and just tell her everything was gonna be okay.
Sure.
So one of the parents called the ambulance for us. And a few moments later, I was able to kind of gather myself. So I grabbed my cell phone, I called my wife, I told her we just had a horrible accident on the playground. And I told her she's got to meet us at the hospital.
So, Ms. Hughes, what do you remember about this day? How did you know that something had gone wrong?
I was actually out front of the property working on some landscaping, and I got a call from one of my tenants that a child had fallen off one of the jungle gyms. So, this is a parent's worst nightmare. No one likes to get a call like this. I'm so sorry this has happened to this family. But I rushed over to address the situation. And, Your Honor, this is when I found out that the child had fallen from the higher level jungle gym meant for the older children. She should never have been up that high. And she should have been supervised. So I'm sorry, Your Honor. I really am sorry this has happened to this family, but...
When you say higher jungle gym and lower jungle gym, explain what you mean by that.
Well, Your Honor, there are two separate playgrounds. One for children ages 2 to 6 with a 4-foot jungle gym, and one for ages 7 and older with an 8-foot jungle gym. They are clearly separated, and there are signs with rules and regulations saying that there are two separate playgrounds.
This is one of your signs here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please ensure all children are playing in his or her designated play areas.
Okay.
Your Honor, it's a parent's responsibility to know how old their child is and to have them play in the right playground.
Mr. Evans, did you see or know about this sign?
The sign is nowhere to be seen. She says there's a sign, but it's so far away. There's absolutely no gates. There are no barriers blocking between the two. We play there almost every single day there, Your Honor. Kids play on both sides, all ages.
When you look at this playground, when your daughter was running up to the jungle gym, did you see there was a difference between the two?
Your Honor, it sits so far back that when you get up to the playground, as you can see in the picture, can you see a sign anywhere in that picture? The seating area is right there, Your Honor.
The sign is right there when you enter the park. It's clearly, and other tenants seem to follow the rules just fine, Mr. Hughes.
But the pathway to the gym from our building, though, is straight ahead where there's no sign. So you'd have to walk all the way around the park.
Well, had you seen the sign, would you have kept her on the left side?
Of course I would have done it, but the sign's so far out of way, you can't see it. And where it said, coming from our end of the park, you can't see it.
His child is 4 years old. What parent lets their child climb up 8 feet in the air and isn't standing right next to them, Your Honor?
So, Ms. Evans, you believe this is not your fault? This happened on your jungle gym, on your property, at your complex.
Yes, Your Honor.
A child is badly injured. Your daughter, she broke her arm, you said?
Yes, Your Honor.
What other injuries did she have?
She sustained a concussion. But I stand by the point that you can see the two gyms. There's no barrier. There's no gate separating the two. You can't tell a little 4-year-old girl that she can't go from one to the other. If they're gonna make it to where they have to have a certain age play on one side and another age play on the other, then they should have a barrier there.
Well, why didn't you put up a barrier, Miss Evans?
Other tenants seem to follow the rules just fine. I mean, I can manage the property for my tenants, but I can't babysit all of their children.
Oh.
That is parenting 101.
You don't know me or my family.
Mr. Hughes, do not transfer your guilt onto me because your child got injured.
Mr. Hughes, your daughter had a concussion and a broken arm, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
To further understand the nature of her injuries, this court has consulted Dr. Eddie Richardson, who's going to talk about her injuries from a medical perspective. So, Sheriff Matt, will you get Dr. Richardson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good morning, Doctor.
Your Honor?
Can you explain Tiffany's injuries?
Tiffany had 2 injuries. She had a comminuted fracture of the left forearm, and more importantly, she had a concussion to her brain. And actually, I brought a video along to show you exactly what a concussion looks like.
Okay.
This is the brain inside of the skull, and as you know, it's surrounded by our cerebral spinal fluid, which protects it. These are actually the neurons and the axons where we're actually thinking and how thoughts travel in our brain.
Okay.
And these cords show how it goes. That's a concussion, and you see how the trauma causes the brain to actually become bruised inside. That is the bruising.
So your brain slams against your skull?
Yes, and then it interrupts those neurons and you stop thinking for a period of time. That's the most important part, where the brain temporarily stops working.
Well, how do you treat a concussion?
A concussion is treated by rest, is number one, particularly in children. And you do not want to stimulate the brain physically or mentally. That translates mentally as no tablets, no loud music, no light sensitivity, and brain rest, as well as physical activity.
Doctor, how long does a concussion take to heal?
Can take up to 3 weeks, sometimes 6 to 8 weeks, 3 months, and in rare cases, up to a year to completely heal.
Does that differ with children and adults in terms of time to heal and what happens in the future?
Yes, Your Honor, that can, because A, it's more dangerous in children because children can't tell you exactly what's going on with them. So therefore, you have to look for the symptoms. And what happens, how that shows up is they have problems with dizziness, with balance, they have problems with recall and memory, light and sound sensitivity, and more complexes. They can't explain to you what's going on, which may take longer for the healing period.
Even in a 4-year-old?
Yes, particularly in a 4-year-old. It makes it more serious in the younger the child is.
So,
Look
Mr.
what
Hughes,
you did to my 4-year-old. Look what you did to my little Tiffany. If she maintained the property as she should have maintained it, this wouldn't have happened. This has happened to multiple children, Your Honor.
Your Honor, my park is safe. It meets all safety standards.
Thank you, doctor. You are released.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Evans, you said you're all up to safety standards. How do you know that?
2 years ago, I completely renovated the whole playground. And so now we are up to date with all safety inspections and all safety requirements.
Yeah, you've submitted the inspection
This is the
report.
renovation report, yes, sir.
Okay.
All the equipment is adequate protective servicing. Surfacing materials have not deteriorated. There are not foreign objects in the mulch and the padding underneath the equipment.
Mr. Hughes, you said this has happened before. You brought a witness with you.
Yes, Your Honor.
This is Miss Josephine Littles. Miss Littles, if you would stand and come to the podium, tell me what you know about this whole thing.
Multiple residents made it clear to the complex that we had an issue with the safety because this has happened here before. My child fell from this same playground 6 months ago, and he was on the proper playground. My child fell and was hurt because there was not enough protective padding on the ground. And in fact, multiple residents signed a letter and sent it to the complex because this had been an issue. My child was injured. We didn't want more children getting injured.
Have you submitted that document to the court, or do you have that
I have
with
it
you?
right here.
All right, Sheriff Matt, if you'll get this document. This is the letter that you submitted to
Yes.
Miss Evans?
From myself and from multiple residents.
Dear Leslie Evans, my son was recently injured at our apartment's playground. I've talked to other parents and we agree that you should install more mulch and rubber padding under the jungle gym to make it safer. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Josephine Littles, apartment B305.
But Your Honor, my complex and my playground meet all the state standards for safety.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, but meeting the bare legal minimum, even when a child has been injured, is not enough. And there is more you can clearly do to make it safer.
100% more. And listen to the attitude in her voice. There's no sympathy.
I am completely sympathetic. Please, I am a parent as well. And where I am possibly unsympathetic is with parents who don't take responsibility for their own children and then blame somebody else.
Ms. Littles.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You may be seated. Ms. Evans, I can see that you're a serious businesswoman and a parent. Your sorry is heartfelt, but it doesn't relieve you of legal responsibility. I think I've heard enough, folks. I'm ready to render my decision. Folks, in every personal injury case, the plaintiff has to prove 3 things. They have to prove that the defendant was wrong and that the defendant's wrong caused your daughter's harm. Here, you've put up evidence that your daughter sustained severe injuries. Your daughter's 4 years old. You send her out to play, you think this is going to be another great daddy-daughter day, and it ends up in tragedy and almost a loss of life. I cannot imagine how frightened you were. You owned the apartment complex. You had an opportunity to make it safe. You've put up evidence that you complied with the code as to the padding, the mulch, how the jungle gym would look, whether it is safe according to the state and regulating agencies. The law looks at all of that, including the first responsibility, which is parental supervision. The law imposes upon you a responsibility to watch out for your children. And if you don't, then the law holds you responsible regardless of how severe the injury is. That's the first legal principle. The second legal principle that's tied to parental responsibility is open and obvious danger. Kids falling from a jungle gym, that's as open and obvious as the nose on my face. And the law requires parents and business owners to recognize an open and obvious danger. Here, you had your daughter out there, she never left your care. If it was a situation where you delivered her to a school, to a doctor, to a daycare, then you relinquished the responsibility to watch out for her. Despite how severe her injuries are, and frankly, they touch my heart because you're a great dad. But the law doesn't stop there. The law says that I look at their behavior, I look at yours, you had the responsibility, they complied with the law, you lose. I find in favor of the defendant. That's my final verdict, and this matter's adjourned. Our attorneys across America just viewed this case for the first time. Let's hear what Chad Dudley has to say.
Here are 3 very important words for parents. Parental supervision required. Here, this meant Mr. Hughes was responsible for the safety of his child while on the defendant's playground. He couldn't expect to drop her off at the park and place the babysitting responsibility on the apartment complex. He had the duty to supervise his child and to recognize potential dangers that may not be age appropriate for her. He did not meet this obligation and lost his case.